For the last 3 seasons now, I have been saying that the primary weapon sandbox is beautifully balanced. Pretty much everything that didn't have a 180 RPM or 360 RPM fire rate was considered usable and viable in PvP. That is still true today, but for a long time it didn't matter because we were not really in a weapon meta of any description. Stasis invalidated gunplay, movement, and positioning to the point where if you weren't running it, you were actually throwing. But now, stasis has been appropriately nerfed, and the balancing that has been going on underneath has finally been allowed to shine. Save for 1 or 2 really egregious items, the Destiny 2 weapon sandbox in PvP is the most diverse it has ever been. Yes, I said that, unironically. Feel free to disagree with the comment down below, which I'll happily ignore. The recent shotgun nerf has completely changed the short-range landscape. Before, it was Felwinter's Lie, Astral Horizon, and a smattering of Reeswalker. Now it's all of those, plus SMGs, slugs, sidearms, and 720 RPM auto rifles. There's less reason to use the old favourites, and more reason to try new things. But when you look past the typical loadouts, there's a mountain of good options. But that's too much work for the average Destiny player to decipher, so one of the most common questions I've been seeing right now around the Destiny sphere, and also in my own stream at times as well, is this: what's the best weapon right now? This is actually quite hard to answer, but I believe I've come up with one. And depending on who you are, you'll either hate it or absolutely love it. Hi, my name is Ascendant Nomad, and I'm your Crucible Doctor. The last 2 State of the Meta videos broke everything down to concrete recommendations. The short range was shotguns, the mid range was 120 RPM hand cannons, the long range was also 120 RPM hand cannons, mixed in with snipers and pulse rifles. Now, recent tweaks to the sandbox means that the lines are blurred and there is no concrete picks for any range brackets anymore. What constitutes a good option in most engagement spaces really boils down to personal preference. Except for Dead Man's Tale on PC and Stadia, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Over on the stream, the last few weeks have been quite an interesting time in the Crucible. Trying out all sorts of loadouts and finding a reasonable degree of success to them has always been one of the stronger aspects of my game. But I was very surprised at how effective I could be with just about anything. Usually it would take me an evening to warm up, but I was getting a lot of kills very quickly, which led me to realize something. The diversity in how weapons have been handled here is no joke. Everything can be used if your playstyle can cater to it, and if you can execute said playstyle well. There's multiple options at every engagement range. There are definitely some very bad options that you want to avoid, but update 3.2.1 brought up a few second best options to meta contention, and there's no clear overall winner here. Except Dead Man's Tale, but bloody hell, let me finish. So I suppose that's as good a place as any to start. Update 3.2.1. Let's start with the root and fan out from there. 2 weeks ago I made a video that said everything is about to change. And it did. The update kept the drama to a minimum in the way it was all worded. We got some details on cone angles to aggressive frame shotguns, a precision multiplier change for 120s, and some cone angle scalar gibberish for Dead Man's Tale, but none of it sounded particularly nasty. Per the patch note, here's what was changed. Shotguns. Increased aggressive frame shotgun cone angle from 4.0 to 4.25 degrees. Reduced shotgun damage fall off minimum by 2 meters. Increased shotgun damage fall off maximum by 2 meters. For aggressive hand cannons, reduced precision damage multiplier from 1.8 to 1.6, preventing a 10% damage bonus from allowing 2-tapping in PvP. Reduced aim assist minimum fall off distance by 1 to 2 meters depending on the range stat. Reduced damage fall off minimum distance by 1 meter. This gives them a 1 meter advantage over other hand cannons. And Dead Man's Tale, removed hipfire damage fall off scalar was 1.8x to match zoom. Reduced aim assist cone angle hip scalar from 1.5 to 1.2. The shotgun change here had the single biggest knock-on effect to the sandbox that I've ever seen. The first bullet point simply concerns aggressive shotguns, so your Felwinter's Lies, Astral Horizons, and Found Verdicts. A cone angle adjustment of 0.25 degrees doesn't seem like much, but it results in a wider overall pellet spread to increase the already inconsistent RNG nature of how the pellets land. It's a net nerf, but honestly, in practice, it hasn't had a whole lot of effect on their overall efficacy. What has had an overall effect is the next two lines concerning damage falloff. In our testing, nearly every single shotgun archetype can consistently kill at 6 meters of distance. The only exceptions to the rule were Rapid 5 frames, which killed at 5 meters, Fourth Horseman, come on, you know we had to, which killed at 4 meters, and Fellwinter's Lie, which we recorded a comfortable kill range at 7 meters once we got the technique down. This is 6, okay, go. RNG, 1 HP. You're aiming at my knees, yeah?
Yeah, no, I'm aiming at your balls. That's what I've always done.
Oh. The net result is that in general Crucible, shotguns have become a whole lot rarer. The difference between 6 and 8 meters in game is actually quite big. 8 meters enabled shotgun aping, where someone could literally top the leaderboard using nothing but Fellwinter's Lie and double scavenger mods. The situational versatility granted by that range was easy to access and relatively straightforward to master. Anytime they got within earshot of you, the shotgun came out. Like American police anytime someone protests for a good reason. And with this versatility gone, the shotgun ape playstyle now just got a little bit harder. You have to get just that little bit closer to get that kill, which means most players, if they're aware enough, have a little bit more time to see that threat, backpedal, and primary them down. Shotgun aping has a bit more of a skill gap now, at least on PC, where a dwindling mid-season population means that the majority of players that you see are hovering around average or just above it. Console may be a different story, though I suspect it's much the same thing given how far we are into the season. In our Discord server, we host community scrims all the time, and we've all been a little surprised at how much shotgunning doesn't seem to work as well anymore. Before, it could be considered a solid plan A or even a plan B, but now it feels like a plan C or D, something to use only in the right circumstances or as an emergency. By the way, we host these scrims on every platform for every skill level, so head on down with the link in the description below if you're interested in participating. Now that aping has been significantly muted, this opens the floor up for a whole suite of weapon archetypes that were, at best, a viable alternative, and at worst, a conscious objection to the meta. Things like sidearms, SMGs, 720 RPM auto-rifles have suddenly found a bit more representation. Being ruined by a couple of Velakidins with rangefinder and control has certainly perked my ears up. Chroma Rush has been a seasonal favourite for many, Multimark CCX continues to dominate in the hands of the knowledgeable, and a good Traveler's Chosen user is someone you'd want by your side at the end of the world. They're not to be messed with. The funny thing is, all of those weapons were reasonably competitive before, but because they're primaries that require you to hit your shots to make full use of that competitive time to kill value, they were passed over for specials and the primaries that accompanied them. Namely, aggressive shotguns with a 120 or 140 RPM hand cannon. Moving on, aggressive frame hand cannons had their precision damage multiplier change from 1.8 to 1.6. From my last video, I explained that this would result in hand cannons doing 80 to the head rather than 90, and so it transpired. The big draw with these hand cannons was their ability to two-tap people rather easily. One stack of Rampage, an Empowering Rift, High Energy Fire, and even a Lumina buff could have done the job. Now, just Lumina's buff and an Empowering Rift will enable a 2-tap, both of which enact conditions to your play in order to be viable. Also, Ward of Dawn, but duh. They've also had their range dialed in a little bit. Minimum fall-off distance now starts 1 meter sooner, and the aim assist fall-off is now 1 to 2 meters sooner depending on the range stat. What this translates to is that if you try and absolutely map people like you did before the update, you're going to either hit and do tickle damage to them, or experience ghost bullets entirely. They now have a hard operating range, which encroaches on prime pulse rifle territory, but doesn't veer off to scout rifle territory, which means their number one competitor is their older siblings, the 140 RPM hand cannon. Where 120s offered high damage at high range, and crucially, enabling safety from stasis while still being very lethal, 140 RPM hand cannons felt like a relic of a meta long gone. One where guns dominated and stasis didn't exist. Now, with the script flipped, the argument for 120s over 140s becomes a tactical one rather than a default one. 140s and 120s now have, as near as makes no difference, the same damn operating range. Several 140s can get up to 120 RPM hand cannon range, like a max range palindrome with rangefinder, Ace of Spades generally, and even Fatebringer with explosive payload. 140s have the superior time to kill over 120s, and have been the kings of dueling ever since Kamikaze's beard was a wee bit of stubble. That being said, 120s still offer higher base damage in a team setting. 50 to the body is really no joke when playing your life is involved. Having that great damage on command as soon as someone peeks is the difference between a round win or loss. 3 120s doing bodies is going to result in someone praying for their life. But with the reduced threat of shotguns and stasis, what is more likely going to happen is that players are going to start to get bold again with the aggression. Trials Report is already seeing a massive uptick in representation with 140 RPM hand cannons for the recent maps. Players are going to hunt you down and find you, and they're going to force you to duel them, and nothing is going to stop them if they're feeling spicy. Except if you have Dead Man's Tale, which, alright, fine, let's talk about it. Holy Christ, whoever wrote this script definitely puts the milk in first. Dead Man's Tale is now not free. The damage fall-off scaler being removed basically means you can no longer challenge snipers with a hipfire. The cone angle hipfire scaler change from 1.5 to 1.2 means it's harder to use and not a guaranteed gimme when it comes to headshots. Out of these two changes, it's the cone angle hipfire scaler that's the more significant change. I'm personally okay with not mapping snipers at hipfire. If I absolutely need to, ADS works just fine for that and is very effective and very forgiving. The way the gun has been designed has been to use it with hipfire in mind, since it fires faster in hipfire, as we all know, so this hipfire scaler adjustment has targeted ease of use. But once you go through the adjustment period and you incorporate the gun's margins for error with the potential for whiff shots, the gun is still absolutely lethal. It's still one of the best primaries in the game, if not the best primary in the game. Vorpal is absolutely crucial for Crucible, as it can shut down pretty much anything in a matter of 3 to 4 shots from distance. Cranial Spike continues to allow 2-tapping at distance if you're someone that knows how to time your shots with the action in front of you. Where people may disagree is those on controller. For PC and Stadia folks with mouse and keyboard inputs, this gun is still top tier, but it's harder to use. For controller users, an already hard weapon just got even harder to use. But I believe Bungie will address this in time, but for now I can't recommend the weapon on controller whatsoever. So, those are the 3 main actors covered. What does that mean, or what did that mean, for the way Crucible plays? With shotguns nerfed, the short range has opened up to more options. SMGs, slugs, sidearms, and 720s are being experimented with, and most are finding a reasonable degree of success with them. Fusion rifles too are seeing more representation for the first time in a long time. With 120s and stasis nerfed, 140 RPM hand cannons are coming back to the fore. They are starting to remind people what they've always been capable of, and their adoption back into the mainstream is just a matter of time if Trials Report is anything to go by. With Dead Man's Tale nerfed, it's still superior, but no longer the default pick if you don't want to be like my friend Tristan throwing every second of his life like he's playing with a dog. 340 RPM pulse rifles like the Messenger and No Time to Explain are now more S tier for primary contention than they've ever been. So, what's the best weapon for PvP? There isn't one. Everything works as well as the player behind the weapon allows it to. See, I told you you'd hate it, but I think a fair amount of you will also absolutely love that I just said that. Since the update, I've seen far more people kill me with primaries than special weapons. I've been blown away by the sheer diversity of the things that kill me, which puts me at edge about my own game. It's motivating me to play better and improve my own game, because if I'm being killed by a plethora of everything, sure, some of it might be down to opponents playing really well, but I'm the common link in all of this. Either my dueling needs work, which is probably true, my footwork is a bit too loose, or I've misread a situation terribly. I haven't felt inclined to dismiss anyone or any play because of what they were using. Not even Dead Man's Tale. There has been a smattering of grenade launchers, fusion rifles, normal shotguns, and even a tenacious sniper or two. But by and large, my experience in the Crucible has been primaries all the way, with a side of abilities. And even though there are some archetypes that have been left behind, like 180 RPM scout rifles, 180 RPM hand cannons, and 360 RPM auto rifles, the weapons team have never been closer to achieving something that we've never truly seen before in Destiny: balance. Now, in the context of this season, we're very much in a grenade launcher meta. Scavenger and dexterity artifact mods costing 1 energy apiece alongside scout rifles means that you should be rocking a Dead Man's Tale and grenade launcher loadout on PC, and a pulse rifle grenade launcher option on controller or on console. Those would be the objectively strongest picks that work for the most amount of existing builds due to their low energy cost. Auto rifles too can have a shout, though when paired with a grenade launcher you're not leaving a whole lot of wiggle room for distance engagements. What you run ultimately doesn't matter in and of itself, but how you build around it certainly does. There are so many cool build combinations you can do for PvP, including a nasty Shatter Dive Impulse Recycler build with Ashes to Assets, which are consisting of all seasonal artifact mods. Disruption Break grenade launchers with dexterity mods and Quick Access Sling simulate quick draw really well, and you can very easily get a 5, 10 or 15 streak without really breaking a sweat. With this meta, it's no longer important to run the best weapons, because I believe with the primaries being the order of the day, what it's really going to come down to is how you can take your game to the next level. And that's where build crafting really comes in. So where does this leave us overall? Well, let me talk about shotgun aping for just a second. Shotgun aping was never really overpowered. It was super annoying to play against, because it was the dumbest thing known to mankind in a shooter video game. Run at the bullets hitting you, raise the shotgun, and delete the other person. It was a really effective way to play with a really effective class of weapons, and it makes everyone who comes across it absolutely miserable. But the complaints are only valid until you decide to look a little deeper. The majority of the player base find PvP challenging. They are not going to devote their time to becoming better. They are watching YouTube videos to siphon an idea of a creator, to be told what is best, and to take that word for what it is. The average player is not entertaining multiple opinions, or doing their own research on what works for them. They are listening to their favorite creator, and nobody else. And if their favorite, most influential creator says Chroma Rush is the best PvP weapon in the game, a monkey see, monkey do effect takes place. People are not really that interested in the ins and outs of what the meta entails. They are more concerned with finding the easy win options and selecting the one that suits them the best. And it's just effective enough to help them finish their bounties and win their games and be done with it. And with this mentality, the average player will always reach for the tools that enable success with minimal input. They will develop the playstyle that has the best combination of accessibility and effectiveness, which is why I am predicting the meta will invariably switch to some combination of a grenade launcher and a hand cannon. But hey, who knows? We've got a few weeks now to have a little fun, and things will be very experimental feeling right until Season 15, which is due for another round of balance changes. So until then, go out there and make the best of what you've got, because the weapons team have absolutely killed it this time around. And the only way from here is up. Thank you very much for watching. Apologies for the delay in production on this one. Plans have changed a few times, partly because of all the changes the game's dropped on us. But hey, we made it to the end. If you like this video, you know what to do. I'm Ascendant Nomad, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.